Hey, what's up, Canada and beyond? Thank you for tuning in tonight for the fifth of our international, intercontinental panels talking about things that would ordinarily not we wouldn't be talking about, but may well be the most important discussions of our day. Without further ado, we have got so many amazing people here joining us. Some of them are going to be coming and going a little bit as we get going here, but I want to jump right into some of the amazing guests that we've got joining us tonight here. Some of you guys will be familiar with some of them, but not all of them. But this is going to be a couple of hours of the most amazing conversation we're going to find anywhere else. Uh, Tom Marazzo, infamous since the convoy, a lot of valuable life experience, former military officer, Dr. Rima Laibow, force of nature, the driving force behind Prevent Genocide, and a couple of very significant bills in the States. We're going to get into all of that. Shawn, Buckley, another person that's been fighting some of the same origins for many, many years, but has really come to the forefront during the pandemic and since through endeavors. Daniel Lion Advocacy, your family has been outstanding voices in fighting against the tyranny and oppression and for our rights and freedoms. But last but not least, somebody who has seen what we're all living again, Vera Sharav. Thank you guys for joining us tonight to talk about this, what I believe is the common bond that although every one of us is juggling an insane number of feral cats projects, initiatives, and different fights and battles, a common thread between us all is these organizations that seem to be the rings that bind them all: the World Economic Forum, United Nations, and WHO, those organizations. Vera, this is a special treat for me. You've done a documentary, and this is what I want to start with. You coined something in my brain that I've been using a lot. I've been using a hashtag, never again is now. Tell us a little bit, for those that have been living under a rock, how you come by having created this powerful documentary titled Never Again Is Now.
Global. Never
Whoa,
again is now global.
key point. Key point. So, thank you for that inspiration. It's an honor to finally be in your presence and here. So start us off. How do you come to this? Because to me, at the end of the day, I think this is history repeating itself, and you're the expert.
Yeah, unfortunately, I recognized some of the signs very early uh, because most people don't realize that the final solution didn't start till Hitler's regime was 9 years. 9 years, that's a long time. And it didn't start right away just with Jews. Okay, the very first victims of the Nazis, medical victims, were German infants and young children under the age of 3. And after them came the various age groups. All these were disabled and they were considered worthless eaters.
Worthless eaters.
Worthless eaters. And when I saw what was happening, I'm at the epicenter at the time, New York City. New York City in March and April of 2020 was the epicenter of COVID, supposedly. Well, what it really meant, the epicenter of medical murder, because the hospitals were actually turned to murderous machines, just as hospitals had been turned in Nazi Germany. And this really, that collusion of medicine with the government. And I put more emphasis on the government than I do on the industry, because industries are there to make money. I mean, there's no real, um, nothing unusual about that, whether it's tobacco industry or pharmaceutical industry. They will make their money, they don't care how. But when you have government actually being in what they call private public partnerships, that's deadly. And essentially, that was the true in Nazi Germany. IG Farben and the government worked hand in glove, as did the Rockefellers. So there are a lot of similarities. And I first realized that something was very wrong with what we were being told constantly on television. At that time, we still all watched the news on television. Was when they said that all the hospitals were flooded in New York, and I got calls from my sister-in-law in Israel. Oh my God, Central Park is now a hospital. I said, what? Well, a few women went with their iPhones. They visited hospitals across the city, and guess what? They were empty. The hospitals were empty. There were only 3 hospitals in New York who were indeed flooded because everyone was sent to those 3. And that's where the medical murder was happening. They were put on ventilators, and that was, and Governor Cuomo predicted. He predicted before he gave the order to hospitals not to treat the elderly, anyone with COVID was to be sent to nursing homes. And he predicted this virus in nursing homes will be like fire through dry grass. And then he gave the order, after giving hospitals and nursing homes total immunity from liability, at the behest of the insurance industry, who were his biggest campaign funders. So how much corruption, all in one nutshell.
Well, it's just one tentacle of this what I think more and more people are realizing is like you said, it's not just the companies, it's not just pharma, it's this these unholy alliances of these public-private partnerships, which is just fascism rebranded by definition. And so they're if these companies, these corporations, these industries, they'll go where the money goes, and they will go where the government allows them to make the money. And that's ultimately where we end up in this vicious cycle. And it took this repeat of medical, genocide across, the planet to start to bring so many of us together. None of us would know each other former life, and it's through some of those kinds of battles, this creeping part, overwhelming, all swallowing entities that kind of bring us together. And that's where Daniel and Shawn, you guys have been on the cusp of trying to expose that through a lot of. Oh, we got a horrible echo there for a second.
Yeah, Wayne, it was certainly surprising, and Tom, good to see you. It's been a while.
You too.
So, Wayne, for your audience that isn't familiar with the National Citizens Inquiry, we actually had 24 full days of hearings, 305 witnesses under oath, including Tom. And one thing that shocked me was just how uniform every institution was in being captured. So, for example, in Canada, every province has an emergency management bureaucracy, and every single province had a respiratory pandemic plan. And the federal government had a bureaucracy with a respiratory management plan. You don't allow public health to take over a public emergency, and yet every province and the federal government all abandoned their plans, and in lockstep. And every single college of physicians and surgeons made it clear that the physicians and surgeons had to, these are my words, not theirs, but literally abandon informed consent and follow the line, and you would be disciplined. And the College of Pharmacists and the College of Nurses, and let's go into, natural health practitioners, the naturopathic colleges and the like. How can it be that not a single institution stood up, except that this was centrally controlled? And why would the Canadian government do that? And then we see all the Western nations doing the same thing. What boggles me, Wayne, is just how did they coordinate it so effectively? I mean, we've got the odd outlier, but I think all of us on this call are astounded by how uniform this was.
I think in this, I defer this response to Tom. It could only be described as a strategic military operation in order to be this successful, multinational, multi-continental, across the spectrum. But again, it comes down to the lowest common denominators when you're looking for the source of this. Is where does all of this? Where is the chief operations center? Where is the HQ of all of these of all of these things? Is that fair, Tom?
Yeah, I think that's very fair. And what's interesting, because I'm glad that Shawn, brought up the emergency management offices across each of the provinces, because they're a civilian agency, but they follow the exact same operational planning process that we use in the Canadian military, which the operational planning process, or OPP, is a NATO standard. When I did staff college in Kingston in 2007, I had officers from Serbia, Lithuania, Czech Republic, in all of the NATO countries. So this process of the way we plan military operations is actually well suited to handle emergencies. And it's a process that you can apply as far as up as a strategic level. This is the whole of your government or of a country, but it can be scaled. Okay. So we often, I think somebody, Vera, I think you may have talked earlier, before we started going live, about rehearsals and how they like to telegraph this stuff. Well, they've been doing, the public knows that all of these organizations, Agenda 2030, I think 21, sorry, there's so many to try to keep track of, but they were all war gamed. They were all rehearsed. Now, you don't get to the phase of a war game, and a war game is actually a big phase at the beginning of conducting your operational planning process. So wargaming is just part of the way we do business in the military, and that's how the civilians do it as well. That's how do we find out the action versus our adversary's reaction. And then we cap that off with, okay, we know what we want to do. We know what the enemy's probably going to do. Now, what's our counter to what the enemy wants? So you do this back and forth. You get role players. And as we saw in that famous video, them gearing up for the pandemic exercise they did 3 months before COVID was launched on the world, that's what they were doing. Was this, they were taking certain experts within their organization, and they were role playing what possible outcomes there could be. And they were looking for counteractions to those outcomes. So this is what the military does, and this is what civilian organizations do. They follow an operational planning process. And I'm almost considering writing a book to civilianize this for people that are now homesteading. I could scale it down to the level to help people prepare in their own homes. That's what the beauty of this process is. And any military officer who's done a little bit of time in the military knows how to do this. The organizations are all doing it.
100%. And it's not just the and that realization I think is key, because right now we're fighting back and resisting in in our regions and locales, and then in our nations, when it's actually an international coup that's going on, and we need to create this international resistance, and that's going to come through panels of discussion like this, and understanding the common source of the suffering. And if there's one thing that I've learned through the course of doing 5 of these now, and Rima will attest, it's the one brilliant thing I've said, is that all of our suffering stems from exactly the same sources. These are the conversations that we need to be bringing our nations together on, to eliminate them from allowing to continue with this, oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist. No, these are conspiracy facts, and we need to normalize these discussions.
And in that regard, I think it's important. Sorry, Tom. I think it's important for people to understand how these public-private partnerships work, and because they're very complicated, and they make my head spin when I'm trying to hold people accountable. And it came up for me in the vaccine injury support program. I thought it looks and smells like a federal kind of tribunal, right? Because it's there to determine vaccine injuries, but it's not. It's a privately run, for-profit. Like a for-profit contract under a contribution agreement with the federal government. And so it's like it's dizzying to try to put the pieces together and hold people accountable. And so there's a lot of stuff like that I think the public has to understand, and to stop their heads from spinning.
I think you're 100% on point with that, and that's where I keep coming back to the fascism definition of public-private partnership. And as Shawn just mentioned, how they captured our all of our infrastructure, our establishment, are corporations, and they are all involved in some form or another in a public-private partnership with unelected foreign entities that we didn't really get a say in. And this has started in the 90s, not just today. So this is something that's taken 40 years to get us here, but we're all starting to figure out, where does this come from?
Well, Wayne, I think also a lot of people would be shocked on how many areas of their lives are being affected by an international agenda. I mean, obviously, obvious ones are climate change, and now this, WHO pandemic treaty that we can't call a treaty. It's almost like Harry Potter, where you can't say Voldemort. But I'm involved heavily in the health field and the regulation of natural health products. And in Canada, we basically spent about 20 years arguing about what a proper model and what proper regulations for natural health products are. And we just, finally transitioned into that. And we're just throwing it out because of 5 bureaucrats with international trade connections have basically dictated a new health policy for Canada. And it's all about international harmonization. It's all about intellectual property rights. We've had Dr. Malone recently come out, and he's not the only one, but just talking about how the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994 in the United States, which has given the United States a lot of freedom to have natural health products, they call them dietary supplements, is being under attack. I spoke with Dr. Robert Verkerk of AHA and in UK this week, and they're using these nanoparticle definitions to get rid of the product. So internationally, all of the Western democracies are basically coordinating to move us into a full chemical drug model at the same time that we're losing our sovereignty as nations to manage what treatments we will use if the World Health Organization declares a pandemic. So, I mean, we see things like the treaty happen that we can't call a treaty, but it's much deeper than that. It's almost like every angle, every area of our life is being captured by organizations that do not have accountability to their electorate.
It's not almost like that, Shawn. It is exactly like that. This is a long plan that has been in the planning and in the implementation stage for at least 140 years, going back to the predatory philanthropy brilliance of John D. Rockefeller Sr. and his vision for the future, which was a profoundly eugenics eugenicized vision in which all of the useless eaters would be either dispensed with or enslaved. And they wanted, 140 years ago, they were figuring out genetics at that time. And they said, ooh, we don't have the science yet, but we could control their genetics, the slaves. We could minimize them. We could make them the most profoundly Untermenschen that have ever existed. And then they couldn't rebel. They couldn't speak out against us. They couldn't ask questions. We would own them, and we would be the lords of the universe. And so this craziness, and I say that with some specificity. I am by training a psychiatrist, so I know crazy, and this is, and I think we all have to stop giving it respect and talking about it as anything but what it is. It is batshit crazy. These people are psychopaths who have a megalomaniacal view of who they are, what they can do to us, and they've been working on it, and they have more money than God, and when they run out, their friends print it for them. And so they have been, and by the way, every modern tyranny first co-opts the medical system and captures it completely. Think about, Mao, think about Russia, Soviets, think about Cambodia, think about the Germans, think about every medical society, every tyrannical society first co-opts the medical society and then captures the children, called comprehensive sexuality education, and destroys the relationship of trust between anybody and anybody else. Well, that's exactly what we're seeing. And so they've been working on this a long time. And what they didn't have was the science to complete the transition from full human to minimized, transhumanized being. And they're very close. And therefore the gene therapy shots and so forth. So if we look, and this is a passionate cri de coeur from somebody who's been creating from the cur for a long time about this. If we look at the malfeasances and the evils of the tentacles, we can see many, many of those. We can see parental rights. We can see the corruption of justice. We can see the perversion of science into religion. We can see communication and free speech being absolutely and utterly governmentalized and destroyed for political purposes. We can see one injustice after another, education, churches, and so on. All of it has one central root. And as long I maintain, I could be wrong, but I think I'm right. As long as we're fighting at the ends of the tentacles, the damn thing's going to grow new ones. It's a Cerberus kind of beast. You cut off a head, it's got 3 new heads. We have to kill the central beast. And in my view, there's only one way to do that. I wish there were more, but there's one, and that is to get your country out of the beast, out of the United Nations, out of all the subsidiary organizations, WHO, UNESCO, all of them, out of the World Trade Organization, the international banking system. And people say, well, what will we do without the World Health Organization? We'll be healthy. That's what we'll do. We'll stop dying at their convenience. Sounds like a plan to me, but what do I know? So I think we, as valid as all of these other pieces are, they are all tools of the monster. And we have to simply get out of the monster. It wants to control every aspect. The sustainability development goals, God help us, are complete destruction of every aspect of humanity, word by word, point by point, institution by institution, gene by gene. And if we distract ourselves, I believe, with fighting the tentacles, we're doomed. And we're doomed soon. There, in addition to the petition that Leslie Lewis is supporting, which Doug Porter from British Columbia created and which she's bringing before Parliament, In addition to that, there are two bills before the United States government. Together, they are called the Disengage Entirely from the United Nations Debacle Act. And that can be supported at preventgenocide2030.org. So can the petition. And we have to build the momentum, the tide. Yep, there it is. We have to build the tide of demand, saying to these people, you want to destroy me, my children, my life, my society, my property rights, and every other right that I ever thought about having. Don't you dare. Don't you dare. And we have to force them back so that we can regain society and we can regain humanity. Otherwise, we are literally doomed.
I couldn't agree more, and that's what started bringing us together internationally to this. Is I think that there's this huge misconception that we're alone in this fight, and although every one of us is fighting worthy fights. Right now is the time where we kind of have to be the Neo in the Matrix and hold them off with one hand and do something with the other, and that's where initiatives like these petitions and these actions are give us that foundation of focus. This is something that is worth putting our time into getting people on the same page of understanding and discussion. Vera, please.
I would like to add to that to actually pull the rug out from under all of them, and that is really the financial. We've got to get out of Federal Reserve. The central bankers are the ones who are bankrolling all those WHOs and WEF and all of that. It's the same people. They're getting bankrolled just as individual smaller organizations are, and just as everything else is. And it's very interesting. I do recommend both a book and a documentary, The Great Taking, by David Roger Webb. What he did, he was a trader, derivatives, all that stuff. But for 20 years, he was gathering information, he was gathering data, and has compiled laws, treaties. They're laws on paper. They're all unconstitutional. They're totally, as is the Federal Reserve, by the way. And, quite a few presidents were assassinated when they wanted to have union money, U.S. money. So what he found is that there is now talk about uniformity. All 50 states in the United States, all of Europe, everything is coordinated. And what they've done is create a situation where people think they own stocks, bonds, whatever. Guess what? They've created a two-tier system. The first takers are the big banks. And they even have a precedent in law. And that was the Lehman Brothers. When they went bankrupt in 2008, JP Morgan successfully fought in court that they have first right on all the assets that remained. And people who thought they owned part of the company of Lehman, Now that's very serious because precedence takes priority in the U.S. law, and I think elsewhere too. So the point is, though, there's one state in the United States that isn't part of the system. And for 100 years, the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, and North Dakota, the Bank of North Dakota, is 1919. And throughout all these downsides and recessions and depression, they've been doing fine. A lot of local banks belong to them, and they're not part of the Federal Reserve. So that's a precedent. And now we've got actually lawyers starting to work on, they're going each state by state, because the states in the United States can get out of this and the federal government can't do anything about it.
I think
This is really because it's the money that holds all of these huge organizations. They listen to want to give them the money, and because they don't have to raise it all by themselves. Whether it's the Gates Foundation and the Rockefellers and the Harrimans, that's who's really controlling. It's still the same families. The New York Federal Reserve is still the same damn families from 1913.
I think that was the point and purpose of the lockdowns, actually, because it shut down every small, mid-sized family, the backbone, and forced the money into exactly the conglomerates that are their own little club. All the big guys. Shawn.
That's what.
Well, Wayne, I just wanted to build on what Vera was saying so that everyone understands. And that Great Taking is a free book. Anyone can download it. But so it used to be before with securities law, if you open an account at your broker and, you bought some Barrick gold, you actually own the Barrick gold. It was attributed to you as ownership. But what they've done is they've changed it so the broker will just have pooled accounts that they own. So let's say they have 10 clients owning Barrick Gold. Well, they'll hold the total number, and you don't actually have them in the account. You get a little statement showing, 100 shares of Barrick Gold, but you only have a contractual relationship with the broker now, whereas before you used to be the owner. So that when that broker runs or bank runs into financial trouble, their creditor sees those Barrick shares of yours are now the bank's assets, and they go to the creditors. And it's even worse than that because they have centralized clearinghouses for derivatives. So basically it's going to the big families that control that. Now, there is a bit of a defense. Like if you're not going to be, trading and trading and trading. So let's say in your portfolio, hopefully you have, a core share of gold mining shares, for example, as insurance. Get share certificates. For a lot of those companies, you can still get share certificates, and even if they're the electronic ones, it is a line of defense. But and your broker will tell you can't get share certificates. You have to go with the electronic version. Often that's not true. You phone the company yourself, and you'll be surprised how many will give you share certificates. So your viewers, that's one thing they can do to preserve some of their wealth for those stocks that are there just for insurance.
I think that's all part and parcel, and can of the same stew here with what you've been fighting with them. Basically criminalizing alternative remedy to only what pharmacia allows. They've set up this pharmacy state where they control every remedy and cure, and it's a money funnel. They only exist to extract wealth from us. We, by definition, parasites.
Can I share how that game works? Because our drug laws in all Western nations, where you have to get a license beforehand, is really there to protect intellectual property rights. And so how the game works is they bring in a Food and Drug Act, like I think Canada's version came in the 30s. But all of this happens around the same time in Western nations, which in itself tells you it's a global game. And they put us into a drug model, so they actually make everything therapeutic illegal. Yep. So everything therapeutic illegal. Sorry, Wayne, you look a little parched. Can you take some water to rehydrate there? Oh, I just broke the law because I'm in Canada, and I just suggested you use water for a therapeutic purpose. So I've made water a drug. And so everything used for a therapeutic purpose is a drug, and the starting point is all drugs are illegal. Anything therapeutic is illegal, and you have to apply to the government for an exemption in the form of a license. So we place ourselves in a situation where the only remedies we can legally access are ones approved by the government. And then we create a regulatory structure for serious conditions where you have to go through a drug approval process. In Canada, it's called the new drug approval process, which is so expensive. I mean, the average cost in Canada for a chemical pharmaceutical drug that's a new drug is around $1 billion. But let's say it was a tenth of that, 100 million. If you don't have intellectual property rights, you won't go through that process. So you basically then just, it doesn't look like that to the reader, but you have now made illegal. You've made it illegal in Canada to treat serious health conditions with anything that doesn't have intellectual property rights. Now, that has nothing to do with health policy. And what we're doing in Canada with our, self-care framework that they're imposing is they're lowering the bar to make it illegal to treat, moderate and even minor health conditions with anything that doesn't have intellectual property rights. So that has nothing to do with health, but that's the game they play in all Western nations. So you read the legislation, it doesn't say it's illegal to treat anything that doesn't, without, if it doesn't have a patent, but that's the effect.
We had the same thing come through, Shawn. There was an FDA regulatory guidance, which was floated. And then if it's not shot down by public comment or some other mechanism, then it becomes law or has the force of law. So they tried to sneak it through. They introduced it without mentioning it in the Federal Register for a couple of months, which is wildly illegal. And we got wind of it. And we said to people, better pick up your Freedom Mouse and we prepared a letter, as you can see on, and as you can use on preventgenocide2030.org. We said, we've set it up for you. You can tell the regulatory poobahs in the Fraud and Death Administration, which is our version of Health Canada, don't you dare. Remember those words? Don't you dare. And over a weekend, 688,000 people dispersed the letters by putting in their name, address, and hitting the word submit, which is profoundly unsubmitting, right? Sending rather than submitting. 688,000 people sent it. We broke the FDA's email system. It collapsed. And on Monday morning, the author of this regulatory framework said in an interview, we've recalled it, and I'm not Darth Vader. Well, yes, indeed, he was intending to be Darth Vader, but as in the Canadian system, their examples were holy water, which is used to make people feel better, and hot rocks, which are used in massage techniques to make people feel better. Chicken soup, which is used to make people feel better. These were their examples of what they were criminalizing and drugifying. This is exactly what they are intending to do, because every single aspect of human life is to be controlled and destroyed, because humans are to be destroyed. Now, obviously, it was very important to get 688,000 people. We would have had more, but the system crashed to get 688,000 people to say, don't you dare. But at the same time, if we don't link it to the source of the suffering, to getting out, we will win Pyrrhic victories, and then we will be totally defeated. In the Pyrrhic War, for those of you who don't remember Greek history, there were significant battles won, but the strategic planning was so poor that the war was lost. Not good enough. We're fighting for humanity, so we have to be warriors on several platforms at the same time, and that's hard. And it's also not ideal, but it's what we got.
But it seems to me like some of these treaties and like membership in all these international organizations are so flimsy, meaning like it just takes how many people, which government to just abandon them, right? Like it could be on the turn of a dime, right? So like, is it really that hard? We just have to put pressure on the right people.
It's ridiculously easy.
In each country, right?
Ridiculously easy.
But
in each country, the head of government, well, in Canada, it's the Governor General.
right?
No, it's the Governor General, specifically in the Commonwealth countries, not the UK. But in the United States, for example, whatever sock puppet sits in the chair labeled head of state in the Oval Office, doesn't matter if it's Harris or Biden or, whoever it is, has to sign a letter that says we're not part of the club anymore. It's ridiculously simple. And in fact, according to the 1969 Vienna Treaty on Treaties, if a treaty has been signed by two entities, two countries, and ratified, and is now law in those countries, which is what a treaty means, then if one side materially changes the circumstances, conditions, or requirements, the other side can say, nah, that's not what I agreed to, and literally walk away without violating usual and customary international law. Now, the United States has not ratified that, but on the Department of State website, it says, but we follow it anyway, which means if you signed on to a health organization that was going to share information and make you better and bring you modern technology, and they decide that they're a murder organization and they're going to kill you, you can say, I didn't sign on for that, and literally walk away with a simple letter by the head of state.
I'd like to expand on that, Daniel. I met with a federal MP, and when I brought some of these questions to him, it was just I just got a we rule through implied consent. If not enough of you say no, we automatically assume you mean yes, and they do it anyway. And so we have this sycophantic community that makes themselves the loudest in the room, so it would appear that would be the following of democracy. And when it comes to the other side of it, we are so discombobulated, disorganized, and uncoordinated, and fractured and splintered. We can't seem to, I think, get that court of public opinion to actually adjourn on the things that would make a significant difference in a very short period of time. Hence this targeted trying to bring alignment to a discussion about exactly what Dr. Rima said. When you look at the countries that didn't get involved in these pacts, compacts, and treaties, all they said was, no, we think that this infringes on our national sovereignty. That's it. Game over. Done. They're out. That's what we need to adjourn the court of public opinion on here in Canada and in all Commonwealth nations. Am I mistaken on thinking that this is actually possible?
Well, it is, but Marxism 101, you go back to your textbooks there. You're saying it's the loudest of the population, but really what we're seeing is the government is actually paying those voices. We've caught them doing it with unions. And so basically Marxism 101, if we follow G. Edward Gerfen, and he nailed it in the 60s, they will get the population to demand, and then they, as a government, acquiesce to what they want, but they paid them to do that. So they're doing this pincher move, and you're stuck in the middle, and you're thinking, well, you're the minority, everyone else wants it. So and that's where Canadians are. They just sit there and they shut up because they think they're in this minority. We're finally learning we've been the majority all along.
And it's like overload and distraction too, right? Like there's so much going on. They just keep pumping out new issues and creating new conflict. Like, let me look what's going on, but like it doesn't end, right? So people are so distracted, and they're missing all the big, the big things that are happening that are going to have huge impacts. So yeah.
Isolated, demoralized, terrified, and given a thread of perception of safety, they will move in that direction every single time.
Keeping us safe.
Yeah.
Something that needs a bombardment of the FDA. They've announced in the Federal Register that if they deem a therapy to have little risk, no more informed consent. Now, that undo the Nuremberg Code.
And not only that, some years ago, an act was passed in the United States, which we lobbied against unsuccessfully, unfortunately, called the Cures
Yep.
the 21st Century Cures Act. And the 21st Century Cures Act says, well, listen, informed consent's really a good thing. But if you have more than 8,000 people in a clinical trial, which of course any little mom and pop nutrient manufacturer is going to do, right? Not. If you have more than 8,000 people in a clinical trial, you don't need written informed consent, which was a preamble to exactly what you've just pointed to. Before he was murdered, and the anniversary of his murder is coming up this week. It was his birthday, February 6th. My husband, Major General Albert N. Stubblebine III, said, informed consent is the defining issue of the 21st century. And as with everything else, which could be really annoying when you're married to him, as with everything else, he was absolutely right. Informed consent, personal autonomy, national sovereignty, the consent of a country, the consent of the governed is in fact the single defining issue of this century. And if we lose that along every parameter, every one of those 17 devil goals, if we lose that, what, I ask you, do we have? And the answer in my mind is absolutely nothing.
But the fact that they feel quite free to do this, I mean, what does that say about what they think about the people?
They think we're cockroaches.
Yeah, no, I but really,
and that the point is, we have to be not cockroaches. We have to be upright, powerful warriors. And the best way we can be that warrior is to speak regardless of the censorship and to use our freedom mouse. This is an incredibly potent tool. I told you 688,000 people over a weekend drove the FDA back, the Fraud and Death Administration, and they said, oops. We did the same thing in 2009 when 3.5 million people in 11 days said, you're going to do what? With the swine flu vaccine, which is laced to produce infertility and sterility? Don't you dare. 3.5 million.
Uh-oh.
somebody got told you
She kicked the router.
We've kind of got this running thing with Dr. Rima in our meetings. She never freezes. We all freeze. Are you back, Doctor? Are we back, Dr. Rima?
Yes, you all went away. I don't know why. So after 11 days and 3.5 million people picked up their freedom mouse and said, don't you dare. We're not taking your shots and you're not sterilizing every man, woman, and child in the United States. On day 12, Kathleen Sebelius, who was at that point the head of Health and Human Services, a misnamed agency, said, okay, we won't. And they dropped the entire fully funded program, which was already set up at 90,000 vaccine administration centers through the United States. And then they had a problem. What do we do with these swine flu vaccines and the sterilizant, the squalene that was meant to be admixed and injected? So they did what any conscientious, kind, caring, compassionate country would do. They sent it to the needy children of sub-Saharan Africa.
How did those, was that by email? How did they communicate to the FDA?
In the same way that if you go to preventgenocide2030.org and you click on support the bill that I talked about to get the U.S. out of the UN and all of its pieces, it sends a letter to your representatives. It sends a letter. You can tweet them. You can phone them. It's all set up nicely. Then you can put it in your social media. It's all real simple, real easy. It takes 2 minutes. 2 minutes. That's all
a lot
it
for
takes.
the kids these days.
Yeah, well, how about for the grown-ups who are looking at the destruction of their lives? That would be good.
Question for you. Nuremberg, okay, I don't know how that was officially brought in as legislation to Canada or to the US. Is that kind of like, and they kind of, let's say they flouted or it wasn't loosely interpreted during the past 4 years. So can't you just do that with any new treaty that's allegedly signed, that's going to be just kind of ignore it and just proceed as is? So even though technically we may be bound by a new treaty, we just don't kind of follow it?
The problem is that the United States is the generator of a lot of these, just like the WHO treaty. I mean, it's coming from the United States.
Well, and from the Department of Defense.
Okay, but if we stop it in the United States, that's it.
Absolutely. When the United States withdraws from the death machine, which is what it is, let's not give it false shiny accolades. It's a death machine. When the United States withdraws, lots of other countries will be able to, and some will have to. Israel, for instance, will have to, because Israel will be eaten alive if it stays in this organization. Other countries will find the strength, and what will happen, I believe, is a de facto new trade and trading collaboration. And the globalists will allow this other beast to die, and then they'll come back around again like they did after the League of Nations failed.
Well, there's rumblings like that already under development, and things like the Kanzuk Agreement, which is so they have always got another plan B, but it's exactly the same wash, rinse, repeat, pass the baton, and it's all under that continuity of government that they seem to have our nations under this spell of, that it doesn't matter which party's in the political power. It still maintains this background shadow development behind all of these things, and they killed Kennedy for it because he wanted to stop it, and maybe that's why they want to kill all of us right now, or so it seems, because we want to stop it too, and that's just kind of.
I want to say one more thing, and then I will stop talking. I will try to stop talking. I may not succeed. And that is that a lot of people think it's important just to get out of WHO. And that is a mistake. For example, you may or may not be familiar with something called PACT, P-A-C-T, for the future. PACT for the future is a United Nations nightmare scenario, which is being enacted and approved this coming September. Pact for the Future is the belt and suspenders version of what we're familiar with WHO and UNESCO doing to us now with One Health and the pandemic treaty and so on. That's subsumed under Pact for the Future, which says, oh gosh, there are going to be emergencies. There's always an emergency. It could be a climate emergency. It could be an economic emergency. It could be a war. It could be a disease. It could be, oh my God, it could be a black swan. There's always going to be an emergency. So when there's an emergency, we, the great ones, need to take over and run things. So why don't we just declare, I kid you not, this is what it says. Why don't we just declare a permanent state of emergency? And we'll just take over everything and we'll run everything, because of course we want to protect everybody from the many, many, many emergencies that could arise. So we'll just assume there's always an emergency, and we'll have a council. This is real. They thought of this. They're batshit crazy. We'll have a council of elder statesmen, and the elder statesmen will be former heads of state. In other words, WEF graduates.
Yep.
And they'll tell us what to do, and then we'll do it globally forever. How's that? That's called Pact
Solutions for a better tomorrow, right?
Exactly. Pact for the future. In case WHO doesn't get what it wants, and it looks like they're having some trouble, they got a backup plan. There's no way to temporize this. If we want to play that game, if we want to let them do it, then we stay in. If we want a chance of survival, then we have no choice but to exit.
I think one of the things that we need to start thinking about is that when we win, we cannot follow their way of wanting my way or the highway. No, we've got to get used to the idea that people in our camp have different points of view, and on different issues we may disagree among each other. That's, that's democracy. It's sloppy. It doesn't function the way a dictatorship does, but there's a trade-off, and we have to understand that. And I know there are many people within our movement that when it comes to some disagreement, is there a virus or isn't there a virus? Oh my God, the fights that go on, vicious. Those are distractions.
Everything's been a distraction, especially this last week or two. We had Tucker Carlson come to Canada. We had the Emergencies Act court decision that came down, and a few other things that happened. And while that was all rolling out and everybody was talking about all of that, what they didn't notice was the Basel III system actually did get enacted here in Canada. The banks, if you were paying attention, were doing the best they could to gobble up gold and silver. And Basel IV is being announced to come out in April. And people aren't paying attention to those things because so many other distractions are going on. And what they don't understand is these distractions are from all these other branches of the belly of the beast. And the belly of the beast is the UN that is controlled by the BIS and the IMF. And if people actually started tearing down those branches and getting to the belly of the beast, then maybe our attention could actually focus on the evil that is trying to consume us. And then maybe we could actually unite over a common goal and figure out, and it's not just about uniting over that common goal, it's also about figuring out what happens on day one of this unification that happens and us finally winning. What happens on day one of that win? How do we proceed? How do we go forward? What does that look like? If you don't have a unified goal and then a plan once you've reached that goal, the white hats, the belly of the beast, the snake, the Satan comes right back in and gobbles you back up again.
I think you've hit on a really important point. And I think we have to start actually thinking about the philosophical basis of government, because I actually think that we're at a turning point in history where once we win, once the corruption and evil is exposed and people have to react because it's gone so far, we're going to have to react and take things back. I think part of our problem is that power doesn't rest with the people. I mean, even the U.S. Constitution that begins "We the people," and it's the best constitution in the world. The government still has authority over life and death. They can enact conscription and send you to certain death in a losing war. So power doesn't rest with the people, and this party system permits the corruption of the parties where, your elected representatives are not responsive to the people that elected them. So I think we actually have to start thinking about, well, what does the next system look like? Because our legal philosophical foundation is the problem. That's where it starts. Because the government has power of life and death over you. We just haven't seen it this starkly before.
Well, our systems of governance depend on certain inalienable truths and moral understanding. That is our social contract, and it does not work without morality or ethics. And the further we get away from that common agreement of that social contract of what is right and wrong, the further we see the impossibility of our system functioning. So, to quote Andrew Breitbart, all politics runs downstream of culture, so we have to fix our culture to fix our politics. And understanding, the system, the depths of the corruption that has captured it is, I think, a monumental step forward for mankind.
Yeah, so let me just introduce another thought, because I was, sharing how basically the government has power of life and death over you. Wayne, if I could make a purchase and you were responsible for paying it, or if I could shift my financial responsibilities to you, am I not your feudal lord? Right? Like, I mean, isn't that what feudalism is you basically have to work for the benefit of your feudal lord. And our governments can spend on non-essential things and overspend, and then we are responsible for working and working and working. And you tell me how that's not a form of slavery. And you see, again, it's because we've given them the power to make spending decisions that truly are not essential. And even for essential ones, we don't have the possibility of opting out. Like, when I say we have to rethink, and I'm not an anarchist or anything like that, I'm just saying that the legal philosophical foundations that we've been operating from, that we, what's the point of, cleaning up the system if the problem is the system?
Exactly.
Correct. I've been advocating for the last probably 3 or 4 years that one, we need to get rid of the party system because it's too easy to corrupt from the top down. So you get rid of the party system. Now you have to basically corrupt 338 people versus only 5 to 10 people. It's a lot harder to corrupt. As well, get rid of the geographical lines in our own countries, because in what we need government for is really just to run the infrastructure of government. And if you run government like you do a corporation, you don't hire a journalist to look after the health portfolio or a baker to look after your economic portfolio. So what I've been advocating for is, one, independence, get rid of the parties, but not only independence, but skilled, experienced people that actually run for the portfolio, that they have the experience to actually litigate within or execute within. So instead of having 338 people running for each different region, you actually have people run for, hey, I'm an accountant, I'm going to run for the economic portfolio, and you elect 5 people to look after the economic portfolio. You have your healthcare system. You have people that have actually worked in and are skilled in the healthcare system running for the healthcare portfolio. Now you've got a government that actually is skilled and experienced and making decisions in the spots that they should actually be making decisions in. And now it's not a matter of, I didn't do my job right, or I didn't vote the way my party leader wanted me to, so now I'm being shuffled to another portfolio, and now I'm going to give all my friends all these wonderful favors. No. The people vote in the skilled, experienced people to actually run the departments of government that they're skilled and experienced for, just like every other corporation in Canada.
So long as once we have equality of outcome, that won't be necessary anymore, Jody. Right?
Jody, I was going to ask you, Jody, just to clarify, Jody, are you suggesting that a part-time drama teacher shouldn't be in charge of the government of Canada? Is that what you're really saying?
Or a fired journalist?
Is that what you're suggesting?
Prime Minister?
100%.
Because I like where you're going with this.
I read this interesting statistic today that said, going back 200 years, we work in this feudal system 176 more days per year than the serfs did 200 years ago to appease their masters. So when you take just a quick gamble, or quick bit of math, and realize if 50% of your income goes to taxes, that means from January to the end of June, you're working strictly for the frivolous spending of Justin Trudeau and
Well, Wayne, and it's not just the money, but I mean, think of all the time, think of all the days we spend just complying with government red tape. Like, if you do your own tax return, that can be a couple of days. If you're a small business person, you're remitting PST and GST, quarterly, and then that's if they trust you, you're doing it more often otherwise. Like, the amount of red tape, like government requirements, and that's slavery too. So it's not just the number of days you have to spend working for them, to pay your feudal lords, but it's all the extra work that you have to do for them, that isn't, financial. Like, I think we're worse off than serfs, and you're saying the same thing. Like, they had more spare time than we did.
100%. And when you look at it from that perspective, we're transitioning from a red tape data harvesting slavery system to a digital slavery system, which is all about the data. They might want to micromanage every penny that we share or any amount of communication, every micro data point of our thought process and actions. That becomes a part of the new red tape that they're going to govern us harder, daddy, through these CBDCs and ESGs and social credit systems, and this is again all of it coming from the same damn source.
Mm-hmm.
I think the point about what happens next is incredibly important, because what we have now is a set of interlocking system components that make up society as a whole, each one of which has been infiltrated and woven into a control system: education, medicine, law, governance, administration, transportation. Every single aspect of society has been, if you will, Rockefellerized through careful, rather thoughtful and brilliant control modules being woven in and normalized. So now all of our institutions are abnormal. All of our institutions have been reformatted in order to serve the machine. And we have to do a lot of head scrubbing from the inside out to redefine what is actually normal, to redefine what is actually human and humane, as opposed to what is familiar. So, Jody, I love the idea of having a different structure of governance and system running, but people who have been successful in the corporatized and Rockefellerized systems, one after another, are probably not the folks that I want restructuring our world. I would prefer people who hadn't been running BlackRock or the medical system or the public health, which is public health entity was created specifically to bring these events about. It is totally corrupt. So I would say maybe great success in those areas would be a disqualifier.
I tend to agree. I think that most areas have been totally shaped by those that we're trying to oust. And so they are their emissaries. They've been trained.
I don't know how you stop at the end of the day new rings, new gangs from taking control, right? This is right, like it's just kind of, if you choose your best poison in a way. I feel sometimes it's like, but anyhow.
Well, can I take a swing at that one? I want to take a swing at that because, I've always believed that, in a business context, I've always believed that systems are solutions. I think if you rely on the good nature of people, you're kind of doomed to fail. And I think that if any discussion were to ever go forward about, rebuilding the government system as we know it now, and there's a balance to be had. So just hear me out here for a second. I think you have to assume the worst of the worst are going to gravitate to the most powerful positions. And so I think you have to create a new system with a certain amount of distrust. And the downside to that is you create too much bureaucracy. So there is a balance there, but I think you have to create a new system that, and I agree wholeheartedly with Jody, get rid of the party system, get rid of whipping votes. I think that's an abomination that should be one of the first things to go, as well as recall legislation. But if you're really going to be serious about rebuilding a system of government, the system has to be the solution. And one of those things that needs to be changed is we have to assume that the worst possible people are going to try to go after those positions of power. We need to create a system that stunts their ability to have too much power, to abuse the system. I think you're always going to find people that'll game it. They'll find the way to get around. I mean, if you just watch the TV show Survivor, you can take some otherwise great people, but wow, can they ever be conniving, right? So what we have to do is sort of set the conditions where you're not relying on the morals, ethics, and values of one particular leader. There's no messiah that's going to come forward in a new government system and say, hey, I'm here to save you all and I'm going to rebuild it. It's never going to work because, the American system was always meant to get rid of a king. Okay, to get rid of that sort of system and put more power into the people. And we're seeing, a few hundred years later, that system is failing pretty bad right now too, because we had Machiavellian people always gravitate towards the power. And they've subverted what normally would have been the greatest model of a republic, in human history. So it's the system that needs to be looked at with a massive amount of distrust in individual human beings and their potential to gravitate towards corruption. Sorry, that it took too long to say that.
No, I think that's
Well said.
Very well said, and I think it brings about something else that is our opportunity at this point in human history is understanding, and I think that can tie this to what you said too, Shawn, in that that when they wrote that Constitution at the time, it was the greatest document ever written because they had that fear of corruption taking over their government. So as much as it was written to never allow for another king, it was also kind of written at that time to try to prevent that, and hence the Second Amendment. The Minuteman shall always be ready in America, right? And that's. We've evolved to a point where that wagon isn't competing with the Ferraris and the Lamborghinis of the world, and so it's time for a serious update in all of our systems going into it with understanding that we have to be incredibly aware of preventing this from happening again, because never again is now. And Daniel, I think you're actually hit on another point too that I didn't want to let slip through the cracks. How do we stop the thugs or the syndicates from just taking over? I think we're actually seeing that. I think we're seeing that on the global scale. We're seeing realignments of geographies and territories where when there is a power vacuum, these other entities, these other little syndicates, and it's really no different. These syndicates are competing for power, space, infrastructure, those kinds of things. And that's whether it's Putin or, in South America, what's going on there. We're seeing restructures of exactly that because the systems are failing everywhere. That was probably taking too long to say something.
No, that kind of a bridge to what I saw over the weekend in it was an old article from the Globe, but this whole FinTrack and the whole international money laundering business, right? And how the attempts there was to control and stop exactly kind of this problem in a way, right? Like these organizations that are pooling together their resources and then it occurred to me, this doesn't, FinTrack itself can be manipulated by the order of the day. I didn't realize the ties to the Minister of Finance and how it can all be pooled and manipulated. So it's just going from one group of thugs, to another. So it's, I don't know what the oversight, civilian oversight for these type of things would look like. But, to Tom's point, yeah, you have to assume that all these systems can be abused by people that are abusing their trust. And how do you develop a new model? I don't know.
Well, and isn't FinTrack and these systems? Haven't these come about because of this UN Convention against Transnational Organized Crime, which is another conference of parties, like this pandemic treaty, And so basically with this UN Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime there's a commitment to basically force governments to track financial transactions and to centralize within each country the reporting of that. Like, I mean, everyone on this call, if I go to the bank and I want to withdraw, $3,000 or $4,000 because I want to buy my groceries and pay all my bills in cash, the teller now asks me, well, what are you going to use that for?
Really?
And I never tell them. I get snarky and say, well, hang on. Can you print off your banking records? I want to see your financial records before I share with you, what I'm doing with my finances. But they're being asked that because of this UN treaty, which has obligated us to start treating ordinary citizens like criminals. So, you've brought up, Daniel, something that actually is another tentacle of this hydra, where we have lost sovereignty and basically have to treat our own criminals or citizens as criminals.
And by the way, Shawn, to that point, because yes, you're right. Sometimes it conflicts. FinTrack and this reporting, the centralization and complying with these treaties conflicts with domestic law and privacy laws, right? And so the article I was reading was about the lawyers at the banks trying to protect the last vestiges of privacy laws in Canada. And you see the pressure coming from the top to putting pressure to put those privacy rules aside, meaning don't ask the guy why he's taking $3,000 to pay his groceries in cash. That's his life, his business. But so you have it's the last fortification of the lawyers at the bank trying to protect domestic privacy laws being squeezed by the Minister of Finance via FinTrack, and yeah, you don't see. I didn't see this coming. I didn't know the connection. I didn't know the history of FinTrack. I didn't know it had to do with so it's yeah.
Well, it's really interesting to Shawn's point there. A few months ago, I was at a bank, deposited money, asked the question, as I said, can I see your badge number? She's like, what? I said, well, you've been deputized into law enforcement. You're questioning me on the use of my own property. And you're doing this on behalf of some form of law enforcement agency as an extension of the government. So can I see your badge number? And she's and I was joking with her. Because I realized, she's a teller at a bank. She doesn't want to be doing this stuff, but she's under pressure from her chain of command to do so. Right. And, it's interesting because, FinTrack was always supposed to be about domestic and international terrorist financing and organized crime. Okay. But what a lot of people may not know about when the government of Canada froze all the bank accounts, what people may not also understand, there was a special list of us. There was about 41 of us that were on a special list. Our names all went around the entire planet to the Bank of China, Bank of India, Bank of England, Wall Street, Bay Street, all of the financial institutions around the world. And they were told, if you have accounts with these specific 40 or so people, stop doing banking with them, stop doing business with them immediately.
Oh shit! I didn't know that it went.
You want to know where the list actually came from? There was one police officer who was sitting at his desk, I assume, eating donuts, watching the media. He referenced something called CTV. It was always Annex A, Annex A, Annex A, and we were looked. It's like, what is Annex A? It was CTV. The police officer who made that list was watching the legacy media do profiles on the 40 of us. That list was now generated, and that special one went around the world. Yes. So
wow,
China, I wouldn't be allowed to do business in China because I exercised my, Charter 2, Section 2 right to assemble.
Thank goodness I wasn't on CTV. I'm stuck to just alternative media sources.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's what I'm hearing here is wash, rinse, repeat on the abuses of power across so many spectrums. It's the same thing in the education system. How is it that every childless teacher wants Daniel Smith's head on a platter for protecting parents from exactly those people.
Yes.
They're criminalizing the parents for wanting to look after their own children, like the children aren't theirs, right? So it's
Well, I think you can stop after criminalizing. They're criminalizing parents, bank customers, food buyers, food growers. They're criminalizing all of us. And as we know from Franz Kafka, as we remember, in a totalitarian society, everyone is always breaking enough laws, contradictory, conflicting, hidden regulations and laws. So everyone is guilty and everyone can be punished at any point for any reason or for no reason. And that is where we are heading. Growing food is now bad for the environment because carbon might be emitted. Living is bad for the environment. We will very shortly begin hearing again that the best thing we can do for the planet is to voluntarily take ourselves into maid chambers, not because we have anything wrong with us, but because the planet doesn't need us. That's about to happen, I have no doubt. So everything that we are is already criminalized and is being iteratively and sequentially and in an enhanced and accelerating way criminalized, in the same way that boys are made to feel that they are criminal just for being male. Young men are being told, children are being told that everything about them as male is toxic. And it's the psychological impact of this is almost impossible to overstate because children are very literal. And that's where we're going.
Try growing a garden without a permit. Anywhere in Canada, they've just given legal personhood to a river in British Columbia. Am I going to go to jail if I go take a drink from that river because I have harmed that river's personhood? This is the absurdity that they are stretching our society to, and it's. What is it going to take to bring us together to say we want out? End it. That's I guess
there's a big issue, and it's something that's not widely spoken about, and I'm even reluctant to do it because for fear that at some point I'm gonna be accused of an utterance, some form of threat. But the reality is this, okay? The public in Canada, in North America, and I know it's different in the States. I mean, we have a very, very different psychological philosophy about gun control as Canadian citizens versus American citizens. And, 3 years ago, I probably would have been happy with what Canada was doing. But now I fully understand the Second Amendment issues and what it does to the American psyche and why. And I think it's correct, by the way. But if you look at this country in Canada, we are being rapidly disarmed with mis and disinformation about gun violence in this country. And it is used on the soft heads of people that would support, legislation to ban everybody having weapons in Canada. But the reality is the government of Canada, the premiers, the municipal governments, they control the police. The police are the ones who have the physical force. They are the ones that could take away your freedom from you. Okay, I look at the judiciary in Canada right now, and I'm so disgusted. I'm absolutely disgusted to the point where it's like, you know what? I don't care that you're a judge. I don't even recognize your authority anymore. You're so pathetic in doing your job over the last, I don't know how many years, but certainly the last 4. I don't even recognize your authority anymore. And I can say that. I can say, hey, I don't even recognize your court authority over me anymore. But the reality remains that they still control the law enforcement, which is the police. They're the ones who still get to have the guns come and kick in your front door. I mean, we saw during COVID, people were putting posts on their social media. Next thing you know, they had police knocking on their door about the posts that they put on social media. Okay, so the police are willful in their terrorizing of the public in Canada. They're the only ones allowed to have firearms in this country right now. And because of this, the public is very reluctant to be more bold. Now, you can't say that about the Americans, okay, because everybody has guns in certain parts of America, and Americans are more bold, okay, and they're not going to put up with this crap from their government. But I think at the end of the day, once the police in this country, once they realize they've been on the wrong side of all of this, once they actually, instead of facing off with the public, actually face off against the government, things will change then. But until then, it's like, just give me one more second. Baby elephants, you put a chain on their leg when they're babies, right? As they get older, they believe that you can't break through that bond, so they just put rope after. They don't need the chain. The public is kind of like that too. You know, when they believe that they need to fear the police, the people who have the force to come and round them up, they're not going to resist. And case in point, look at what happened in Ottawa. We were a peaceful protest. The media lied, the government lied, the police were fully willing to come in and do what they did to Canadian citizens and veterans. And it's disgusting and shameful, but they're still willing to do it to this day. The police aren't reflecting on it, and the public is still worried that that's going to happen to them again. So really, I think a big piece of this has to be winning the hearts and minds of law enforcement to convince them that you guys have been on the wrong side of this the whole time. Once that does, courage is contagious. It really is contagious. We need the police to come over to our side. They're the only ones right now that have the guns. And I'm not advocating for violence. I'm not advocating for violence. Let that be clear.
I think there is misinformed as most of the rest of us, and
Yes.
they don't understand the depths of this as well. That the organizations that they work for, they serve those organizations. They don't actually serve the people anymore. And those organizations are corporations that are in public-private partnerships, and those from on high are is changing the landscape of what their objectives are to DEI ESG. So those are the parameters of success for from the ideology coming from the top, and they're as confused and misinformed about the corporations that they work for, thinking too that if we win the next election, this will change and it'll stop. But it won't.
Guys, I got to take off, but it was good. Thanks for having me on. I got a blitz now.
All right, thanks so much,
Daniel.
See you, Daniel.
Hi, Daniel.
We'll do it again.
For sure.
Wayne, if I can just follow up on your police discussion, because I think it's another part. I think the police, two things have happened. Is first of all, the war on drugs made the police our adversary, because then just ordinary people that weren't harming other people became targets. But I think also the police culture has changed, and they have been weaponized. And let me just share with you two stories on those 2 points. So I don't know, let's say it was like, it's got to be like 15 years ago, because my kids were smaller. And I would go to circuit court in Valemount every month or every other month. And so it's summertime. It's probably August, nice summer day, and we're driving to Valemount because I've got court the next day. So we're on the Yellowhead Highway. This is one of 2 Trans-Canada highways. And I run into a roadblock that the Valemount RCMP have set up, and not for commercial trucks, for all traffic. So every single vehicle in both directions. First time in my life I've run into a police roadblock that, wasn't just commercial vehicles or, the tragedy of our, Christmas, New Year's season looking for drunk drivers. Oh my gosh, it's too bad the Supreme Court ever let that wedge in. But they're stopping all traffic both ways. And like there's a line of cars, off to the side because they need more attention. And the cop recognizes me, and oh, you're going to court, and off you go. I get to go. But I mean, I was so mad. Because now I was no longer free in Canada to get on a highway on a hot summer day, not doing anything wrong, and just be free to drive. I realized I'd lost a freedom. So I wrote a letter to the editor to the province newspaper in Vancouver, and they so liked the letter, they published it as their letter of the week on Sunday. And I got a call from an ex-Vancouver arson, or I think it was Vancouver police, who had been, like a career guy, but he retired a little early. And he said, it used to be serve and protect. Like it used to be, the attitude was serve and protect. But he says they slowly, ever so slowly, changed the culture to where the citizen was no longer there for us to protect. The citizen was our adversary. And so all the young officers, the culture is the citizen's the adversary. The citizen's doing something wrong. The citizen needs to be watched. You need to protect yourself against the citizen. And he says a lot of us older guys, we quit early because we can't handle the culture change. And that, the hair on the back of your neck just totally stands up. And I'll just give you a tragic story about, how the police became adversarial. It was the war on drugs that did a long way to it, because, now we're searching cars, we're searching people on the street. We're, the courts are allowing the police to go into people's homes in the middle of the night over, drugs of all things. So, I had a client, charged with simple possession of marijuana, and this would be like 25 years ago, where we had to terrorize citizens. And we're talking a young couple, probably like, 26, 27. They're asleep in their bed. It's like 1 or 2 in the morning, and they wake up because the police turn the light on in the bedroom, and there's like all masked police with their big guns standing around the bed. So they're like, already that freaks you out. And then the husband says, let me slip out of bed and get clothes from my wife who isn't wearing any clothes. Well, we can't have that for officer security. So they whip the blankets off them so all the officers can, goggle this like 26-year-old woman. And, years later, she was still traumatized. And it becomes adversarial, for like quarter ounce of cannabis. It's been atrocious, but we have to understand the police have been socialized as part of this. Absolutely. so that they're not there to protect us anymore in their minds. And like, I'm overgeneralizing because I know there's some really great police officers who really care, and my gosh, what a tough job. But when I've got experienced officers telling me there's been a culture change, and we've all experienced the culture change. When I was younger, I'm 58, when I was younger, if I was walking down the street and saw a police officer, I was happy. Now it's like, how do I act so that I'm not harassed?
That
in the United
Sorry, go ahead.
In the United States, that was a real problem. The police were members of the community. They saw themselves that way. They had a serve and protect mentality. And so the smart people in the corruption industry decided that what they would do was give every police department in the United States military weaponry that was either obsolete or was going to be replaced or was perfectly good. And so of course, who doesn't love toys? And who doesn't love toys that will help keep them safe and get rid of the bad guys with bigger caliber and all that stuff? Who doesn't love that? Who's a cop getting weapons and personnel carriers with armor and vests and, good stuff, dress up, all kinds of good stuff. And they got to keep it if they used it at least once in the following 12 months. Otherwise, they had to give the toys back. Well, you know what happened? Every single police department in America found a reason to be able to document and validate that they could keep their toys. And so communities that had absolutely no violent, highly energized interactions with the police for a really, really long time, maybe ever, suddenly found themselves confronting military-grade weapons in the hands of armed adversaries for whom it was important to have a reason to use them. The culture shifted radically overnight.
Here in Canada, it was almost to a day where you could point to it. It was the G20 riots in Toronto that gave the justification for the militarization and the weaponization of the police, and every single city started getting armored vehicles in Canada, and fully tactical forces. And I liked what you said there, Shawn, about the war on drugs creating this culture, but I think that exploded with the intelligence branches and the military contractors in Afghanistan and Iraq that churned out tens of thousands of surveillance and intelligence experts, weaponized, militarized guys, that when there was no more war to fight, they all came back and got jobs in Silicon Valley because they were such good soldiers. So if they didn't join the private contractors club, they were given jobs in Silicon Valley. So now we've seen this weaponization of the police state, not just through the police, but through our media, communications, all the way up the food chain.
Mm-hmm. But we keep talking like they took the power. And that's the thing that we keep forgetting, is over the course of 5 or 6 decades, we became disinterested in politics. And in that disinterest, they took advantage. They kept seeing how far they could push us. And they kept pushing farther and farther and farther. And now we've become brainwashed into thinking that they have all the power. Here's a book from the 70s about Canadian politics. And it says, it's right to say then that the state is an article made to measure by its citizens, according to the precise amount of obedience they're prepared to offer it. The moment a state has grown too powerful, too weak, or too misguided, ceases to make the citizens feel like they're governed justly, they have the right to insist on change, peacefully if they possess the means, by force if they do not. And that's how they talked in the 70s. That was written by Pierre Elliott Trudeau. So it gives you an idea. They used
before or after the War Measures
talk
Act
about overthrowing their government if they went too far. What have we become? So our systems are going to fail us. Our new politicians are going to fail us until we take back the idea that we are actually in charge of the government, and they serve us. We do not serve them. And first and foremost, we have to get that back into our minds.
Well,
very different language today.
I'd like to just point out how far we've come. We've come to the point where anybody that objects to them expanding the death program in Canada for children, the vulnerable, the youth, with or without consent, is now guilty of the crime of withholding medical treatment to somebody that desperately needs to get out of this world. That's how far we've come in Canada.
Yeah.
Can we use that? Can the ammunition manufacturers use that, like maybe to get around regulations?
Vera.
Well, we've got auxiliary police, private police. They're not even police at the airports. What airports have come to be after 9/11 is just, we're all criminals. Body scans, face scans, I mean, you name it. And nobody's complaining. This is what really, I had to go to Nashville, and anyway, the way people are accepting this humiliating, degrading way of being treated like criminals, the long, long lines, security, and these guys are totally private. Nobody knows who or what.
We're all guilty until proven innocent, and we're all sick until proven healthy. And that's how we've been operating definitely for the last 4 years, if not longer than that. Like you said, back to 9/11 is when we gave up our innocence. And definitely in the last 4 years, that's when we gave up our healthy status.
That's right now, the drugstores in New York, everything is under lock and key. We are the criminals, and maybe they'll open up. So now, instead of serving, right, used to be salespeople would help you to find things and whatever. No, now it's only they watch you while they open the door on whatever, toothpaste, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We are the criminals. We are regarded as criminals when we walk in, as they have to watch us.
Yeah, the first time that became obvious was when they started charging you before you pumped your gas. That was the first big shock, and people just do it now. But I remember when that came out.
The prison lineups to get in and out of the store, to walk up and down the aisles in the correct direction, make sure you're 6 feet apart. Those are prison rules. Every clerk, every bag boy, any person that, whether they spoke your language or not, was now the enforcer of the law. And we were the criminal if we dared to exercise our rights and not wear a mask. How dare you? You're killing grandma, you criminal.
She wasn't such a great grandma.
Yeah, the tablet is much better, a much better way to live.
This is where it leaves us is all of us gathering together on a Saturday night trying to figure out how do we motivate our people to get the people that they have within their voice shot to say, get us out.
Wayne, we were just talking about masks, and I think everyone here remembers how stressful it was. Because I got kicked out of some stores, and there was the odd time, like let's say I had to go get milk and eggs. I would put a mask on and just in and out because I didn't want the stress that day. It was so pervasive. And I think what we have to understand, because we all know on this call that more is coming, whether it's, disease X, whether it's, them, terrorist attacks on our grid within our own borders, whether, it's collapse of the financial system, whether it's things we haven't even thought about. We know that they want to create more fear. We know they want to lock us down again. And, but we've been through it now once. Like, people were terrified of COVID, regardless of which narrative, you believed. You either believed, some virus was actually going to kill you, or, you believed some vaccine was going to kill you and the government was going to force you to. On a couple of lectures I recently gave in Alberta, we probably had, between the two of them, about 900 people there. And I asked the crowd, I said, put up your hand, listen carefully, put up your hand if you seriously believed that, in the dark days, that the army was going to go door to door, dragging unvaccinated people out of their homes and forcefully jabbing them. Now, this is in the province of Alberta, where the opposition leader was openly calling for this. But notwithstanding, almost every hand went up. Now, that is fear.
Yeah.
That is fear. Now, but the thing is, I want everyone to understand is we've been there, we've done that, we got the T-shirt. So the next time we're going to know what fear's like, and we're going to know that we can get through it. And we've been confused before, and we've been short of information before, and we've been tricked before. And now we know we really have to follow our gut, and we really have to pray and take the Holy Spirit's guidance. But, we no longer have to live in fear. And I think we've learned that. Like, when you're surprised the first time, you're just there, right? And like, Tom, hats off to people like you and the truckers that stood up. The world got courage, and we're not going to forget that. So, we all know it's coming, but I think, part of it is understanding we can get through it, and we have before, and we will again. And generation after generation before us, they just dug deep and did it. And that's what we're going to do.
I think you made a very key point there. You know, we got through it and been there, done that, got the T-shirt, and I think that really lends itself to a progression that we of discussions that are ongoing about what these guys are trying to do, i.e., this pandemic treaty that is failing miserably simply because there's nobody that can agree on what amendments they need to make it work better. And in the meantime, there is more and more groups of us asking questions like after millions of dead and collateral damage, we don't need amendments to pandemic treaties. What are we even doing considering negotiating with you guys and you monsters about anything? Get us out. And instead, we have a leadership that continues to want to fulfill these attaboy boxes. That's where our challenge is, I think.
One of the, go ahead, Vera.
I think you're absolutely right. And you know, the truckers, just look at I think there are 12 countries now where, okay, the farmers, they picked up where the truckers left off.
Yep.
And that's having the governments shaky. You know, I mean, the French actually undo the highways with the tractors. That's getting pretty rough, huh?
The French have also rescinded some of their what they were implementing against the farmers. Yes. They're backtracking.
They're really, yeah. They it's too much. Again, it was the Dutch who first, but now we've got about 12 countries, and it's both East and West Europe. So that happened. The other thing that had happened was when the FDA said it was okay to give the shots to 6-month-olds, the mamas woke up. And guess what? They didn't bring them. Clinics were closed in New York. And now then mamas are not taking the children for the whole schedule. So there is, you know, it's not so quiet, but it's not very loud, you know, telling the government, no. This is having an effect. They aren't selling the boosters. They've had to throw out, you know, millions of doses. Well, of course, the companies made the money. But the people aren't getting injected anymore. So I don't think that if they plan another lockdown, it's going to work the same way. You know, it's a little bit of cry wolf. A lot of people have learned.
What concerns me is that with the increase of people who are skeptical, who have lost any kind of trust or faith, quite appropriately, in the disinformation that they're fed and the controls that they're put under through fear and coercion, more and more people are skeptical. In fact, Vera and I have talked about the fact that it's the blue collar and manual labor people who are saying, nah, I don't believe that. I'm not taking the shot. It's the academics and the intellectually inculcated who have learned to accept revealed authority from above, who are saying, oh, well, you know, I have to do what they say because otherwise. So there is a class divide and an educational divide between the people who are saying yes sir, 3 bags full, and the people who are saying, nah, don't buy it. One of the things, and that divide has to be accentuated by us as we communicate what we believe to be truth and accuracy and flexibility and reality. One of the things we have to stop doing, in the same way I think we have to stop calling them the elite. They're not elite, they're scum. They're scum with fancy clothes and airplanes and cars and privilege. They're rich scum, but they're scum. They're disastrous scum, and we have to stop giving them respect in our language. We also have to, I believe, stop saying that we had a pandemic. We didn't have a pandemic. We had a propagandemic. Modern societies don't have pandemics. If you have hygiene, sanitation, and nutrition, you don't have a pandemic. What we had, as we all know, was an increase in cataclysmic iatrogenocide through the rollout of the crap, of the injected crap. That's what we had. So why are we talking about a pandemic? We know we didn't have a pandemic. We had a propagandemic. And they're going to give us another propagandemic if they can get away with it. Well, we have to recapture the language and have a level of precision and share that level of precision based on what we know. In the same, tangentially, when they started saying we had to mask, we looked at the Americans with Disability Act legislation that says if you have a breathing issue, you need accommodation, which means you can do what you want. And so we printed up cards that people could have in their wallet saying, I have a disability. This is the Americans with Disability Act. And that's a breathing disability. And then we also have a vaccine exemption card that's valid in 134, we being the Natural Solutions Foundation, valid in every country that has ratified the Geneva Convention, which is pretty much everybody saying, nope, I have the right to refuse all vaccines. And you know what? It works. When we take our courage in our hands and when we put our truth in our mouth and we strengthen each other by being aware of what we can do and seeing other people do it, it really does work, which of course, paradoxically, just makes the other side more dangerous. However, we have no choice but to do that, I think. And could we stop saying pandemic? We never had one. Not since, the Middle Ages and the cholera plague in London. Yeah, there were cholera plagues. We're out of that. We don't do that anymore.
I remember seeing a sign. It's not a pandemic. It wasn't a pandemic. It was an IQ test.
Certainly true. I must have reposted that several times.
Yeah, that was a fun one, wasn't it? I also think that we're in a period of that. We'll look back at it as a time of a great revealing. I mean, we see that the world's just completely upside down, but we're having this discussion and even having to have this discussion because many of our fellow citizens don't see it, but they're going to see it. Like, we are in part of a great revealing, and I think that there's going to be a great moving of God, and he's going to be bringing people back to not tolerating lying and not tolerating deception. I think we're going to have a complete civic kind of renewal and get back to solid institutions again. So as awful as it is, it has to get awful for people to decide to make it better again. So I'm really optimistic. I think we're in for a wild ride this year, but I bet you if we held this, committed to come back a year from now, all of us, and have another show, that we would conclude we're in a better place 365 days from now than we are today.
I have to agree with you 100%. If I think back a year ago, I'm far more optimistic now than I was then. That grows as with every month that goes by. I see, the victories starting to stack up. It was just always going to take some time for us to figure out what we're actually doing and how to compete against this. I do want to do something that I haven't done on this show before here, and we're getting close to the end of this, but I'm going to play a really short video and get everybody's take and on what their last thoughts are as we disperse here tonight. So Jody and Cris, I think you're really going to appreciate this. I believe love is the natural human state, and that's how we win. And people need to be inspired and motivated. We are making and changing history.
I think Cris could have done a better job with that video.
We have that magnificent video, inspirational and powerful and beautiful. We have it on our website.
Yeah.
I'm so impressed.
The URL for it so we can all post it. It's great. Absolutely great. And the truth is, look, what we really look, no one from our side who is not taking the shots, who's not ever going to. But then the other side, it's silently, it's not, stampede, but they're doing it quietly. They're not showing up. And that's all.
Yeah, we're not changing sides, but a lot of their other side are.
And they know that. We
Yeah.
need to understand. They know that they're on a losing course. So the question is, what will they do? Well,
yeah, the convoy showed us a lot in many ways. Half it was a miracle where all these millions of people came together and they were all on the same page. And you think that was a miracle. They stayed peaceful. They knew how to handle the press. They knew how to respond to the police. And you think, how did that all come together? But we forget that the government put us through psychological warfare training for 2 years, their 2 years leading up to that. So we were trained by our own government on how to do that convoy and how to respond to them. And that's, to Shawn's point, that's been continuing. So the next time they try to throw a punch, the people are smarter. And I think they're going to respond in a way that is like, okay, now the gloves are off and we have the minds, we have the people on our side. And it's our own government that's trained us to do that. And I think it was one of the biggest strategic errors they've ever made.
It also built courage. And as
Absolutely.
I think Tom said it earlier, courage is contagious. And it really, truly is. And we learned not to be afraid. The worst thing that happened to me there was being pepper sprayed. I'm not afraid of the police. I'm not afraid of the Bretons. I'm not afraid of their pepper sprays anymore. And in fact, I know how to defeat all that and protect myself better. I'm not afraid. Bring it.
No, she gets me to pepper spray her like once a week.
Way too much information.
This has been absolutely amazing, guys. I've used up so much of your guys' evening tonight. We've been here for a couple of hours. I just want to give everybody a second to throw out their last thoughts, where people can find them. We'll start with you, Tom. You're right beside me. Thanks for coming and joining us. Some of you guys were a bit blindsided, not knowing what you were getting into here tonight. So I hope it was a good experience for everybody.
Well, I'd like to try to tie a point between something Shawn said about, the lectures he was teaching, talking about the military coming into your house and, force injecting you with the video. And I want to put this into a quantifiable sort of perspective that I think is helpful to people. Vera, you might like this too, because the Canadian Armed Forces, the entire Canadian military, is roughly around 50,000 people. Okay, the New York City Police Department has about 35,000 officers in your city alone. Okay, there's 39 million Canadians. There's 340 million Americans. And so when you just look at the numbers and you tie that to the video, they are very few and we are many. Yep. And so realistically, from a practical point of view, the chances that anybody's coming to your door to pull you out and do anything to you, especially now after everything that we've already been through, good luck with that. Good luck with that. I'd like to see you try. I don't want to see you try, but good luck with that. So
I like the way the Germans. I like the way the Germans say it best. There is net zero chance they're stopping until it's over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tom. Dr. Rima, we'll just go around the clock here. You're not tired of these yet?
Not at all. Not at all. I am inspired by these and continue to be. We are the power. We have granted them leave to oppress us. It's time to pull that power back. We have no choice but to succeed. Intentionality creates reality, and mass intentionality changes the world in a collective way. Individual intentionality is unbelievably powerful. Some people call it prayer. You can call it what you like. So we have to set our intentionality and then implement our intentionality. We are many and we are free. And if we fail to remember that, we are dead. So I say we remember it. And let me give you a website, preventgenocide2030.org. It's an action site, lots of information, but it's a place where you can ride your freedom mouse and compel the gatekeepers to do what you want.
I love it. I love it. Vera, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been truly an honor and a privilege.
Let me just say one thing from my childhood. Suddenly, during this time, memories came back. And one of the strong memories that came back to me, and it has given me really the courage to do what I do, is that when I was 6.5, I disobeyed authority. And that disobedience saved my life. When I was supposed to be leaving finally for the last time Romania, see, I had been rescued from a camp in Ukraine, but I was headed toward Palestine. And there were 3 boats that were waiting for us at Constanța, that's the port city in Romania, from which we were going to Istanbul and then to Palestine. 3 boats. And one of the boats was for all the orphan children. And I was supposed to be an orphan child. I wasn't really. I had a mother, but she lied to save my life. And I wouldn't go on the boat with the children, no matter what. The reason was that I had befriended a family on the train going to the port city, and I trusted that they would take care of me. I knew I couldn't take care of myself. So I wouldn't get on the boat no matter what. And I was, no matter what, they tried to bribe me, to threaten me, whatever, and nothing. Eventually, miraculously, they gave in to me. Today, they would call it oppositional defiant disorder, and drug and all that. No, at that time, not quite. So anyway, I won, and they let me go because the boats had to leave, and I was all alone. I always was very seasick, so I did not witness the horror. I only found out about it the next morning. During that first night out at sea, the submarine torpedoed the boat with all the children.
Oh,
I heard about it the next morning, and I never said one word. Nothing. I never said one word. But to myself, I said, I was right not to get on that boat. I also had a pang of guilt because I was glad to be alive. I did not, most of my life, particularly think about that incident, but that's who I am. When push comes to shove, I will not give in. And this has helped me a lot now. And it helps to tell people you have to trust your own gut. Authority means nothing. Could have been the other way. Could have been our boat that could have been torpedoed, but it wasn't. You have to go by reality, and your experience is reality.
Yeah.
Forget experts. That's the worst thing.
yes.
It's call them, we call them elite, but experts. We don't need experts to tell us how to run our lives. And that's what we really, really need. We need to take confidence in our own ability to make decisions. But they really have tried very hard. They've been playing the psychological warfare for a long time. It's very, very well delineated. And no, I'd say to Desmond, no, we do not tell the leaders, that we really want authority to tell us what to do. No, we don't. We need to embrace our individuality. We're each different.
I think that's another one of those things that we should realize that we're not alone. There's many of us that are certifiably disobedient to the insanity, and to me that's something that I cling to, and I say it all the time. Insanity is unsustainable. This is a war of attrition, and the truth will set us free. We are entering the Great Awakening, whether people like it or not, and those dark beasts will not like it, and they will kick and scratch and try to keep the carpet over their little snake and viper dens, but I think we're winning slowly but surely. Jody and Cris.
Did we miss Shawn?
Oh, we missed Shawn.
And I thought you were just going to give me the last word. So, and sorry about my guard dog. He gets angry at night. I'm not sure why, but I think it's a good trait. So, it's funny. So when we hear Vera talking about trusting your gut, and we've actually spoken about that earlier, our guts are not going to stop speaking to us. And I think we're entering a time where authorities are going to be trying to force you to do things, and your gut's going to be telling you no. And we're going to have to make decisions that may cost us, but you have to follow your gut. You have to follow the Holy Spirit. You have to be true to yourself, because we're in a wonderful time where we get to actually choose, because we have to choose who we are. And I would like to end just by reminding you of how powerful you are, because we've been immersed from our birth in this culture of fear, where we've actually been led to believe that we don't have power and that we're supposed to be afraid of our government. And you don't understand how powerful you are. And you now have a responsibility to start acting and start resisting and start making a change. If there was, I'm in the province of Alberta, and I think we have like 86 MLAs. And let's say we had 100 people in Alberta watching this call. And those 100 people would commit, I'm just going to take, 2 hours once a month, and I'm going to write a one-page letter to my MP as to why I want them to stop jabbing kids. Like, what it's going to take you 20 minutes to write a one-page letter. It only has to be a couple of paragraphs, but the message is, I want you to stop jabbing kids. Now, you've typed that in your computer. The address for the legislature is the same for every MLA. So you're going to just spend the next, hour just changing the name and printing one off for every MLA. Like, we're in the West, we call MPPs MLAs. Well, if 100 people watching this show in Alberta would choose to do that, like, what, 2 hours a month for a year? It means every MLA in Alberta will have received 1,200 letters telling them to stop jabbing kids. And I promise you, no MLA in Alberta has received 1,200 letters in a year on any issue. And they would take notice. And I mean, and that's a small thing. That's not even getting you in their face and demanding meetings and you deciding other things. So I just want to remind you, like, you're not accustomed to taking action because you've been trained not to take action. You have so much power you couldn't believe it, and it's time for you to be powerful.
I love it. I love it. It's we've committed power atrophy upon ourselves. We've stopped walking and our legs fell off. Jody and Cris, now it's your turn. But you got to take the mute off. There you go.
So, Shawn, you're absolutely right. Before the Freedom Convoy, I was doing speeches all around, and one of the speeches I like to do was about the power of one, and yes, you can. And it just takes one person to get on the dance floor to start the fun. It takes one person to stand up to the podium. It takes one Terry Fox to run and raise money. It takes one Hitler to create a Holocaust, but it takes one Gandhi to unite the people. And we all have that power of one in us, but we also have something else in us, and that's the spirit of our Creator. And with our Creator holding our hand, walking beside us through all of this disaster, mess, chaos that is here, we can do anything. We have the power. It is within us, and we just got to grab it. We all have a superhero skill. We just got to find it. And it might be writing a letter. It might be putting a message on your van. It might be handing out pamphlets. It might be running for politics, or it might be holding the line. But we all have the power to start something that is worthwhile, and it will catch on. Courage is courageous. Power is courageous. And with our Creator holding our hand, walking beside us, we can do anything.
Amen. Keep living free.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Don't get distracted. I'm really big right now on saying that, when I go to a movie, I can figure out where the plot is going, not because I'm guessing the plots, but I know the writer. I know what the writer is thinking. And so I know where he's going to go with the script. And that's what we have to focus on, not the tentacles, like Rima was saying. We've got to not get distracted and get caught up in these petty little fights. We've got to focus on where the problem is and focus on the problem and focus all our attention. And we're getting there. We're coming together. This has been a great year of encouragement because we know that we are winning and we see it on every level. So we have a lot of hope right now, but don't get suckered in. If you want to get suckered in with the symptoms and not deal with the problem, go work for Pfizer. This is the freedom movement. We're going to take this, but we're getting smarter and smarter. And as much as we're getting smarter, they're trying to divide us, and we're seeing that division. That's actually a compliment. That's actually encouragement, because we're getting closer to the target. So I believe in us. I believe where we're heading. I see people like you all day working in the same direction. You're just doing it from different areas. So, slash at a tentacle, but also poke the beast in the eye, and let's get this thing won once and for all.
I think we've narrowed it down to 6 little words. Don't you dare get us out. Simple. Now all we've got to do is get 400 some odd million people demanding the same 6 little words, right?
That's not so hard.
I think it's it's absolutely achievable. Tally ho! Here, hold my beer because I am just dysfunctionally non-compliant. Thank you guys all so much for
Thank
taking the time to join us here tonight, and we will see what we can do about lining up some more of these. The intent when we first launched this was to do one every week until the petition closes on February 7th here in Canada. So that was the rally, was to try and get people discussing simplified conversations, get to the source of what we need to stop. So I think this has been amazing, and I think that we're on to something we need to keep this going. So I hope we will see you all around again real soon. So again, humble gratitude and thank you all so much for coming. And if you're out there, take these nuggets, engage your Freedom Mouse in hyper gear, and let's get us out. All right. Have a good night. Bye for all.
Thanks, Wayne.
Thank-